Hello, and welcome to the Monday edition of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm Chris Carter. He's not Ray Fittipaldo. That's Noah Hiles, our enterprise writer who covers all things sports here in Pittsburgh. We're going to be talking about that rough game from the Steelers on Sunday Night Football where they lost to the Chargers 25-10. But we want to remind you this podcast is presented by FanDuel, but is also brought to you by Edgar, Snyder Associates. You know they also do workers' compensation. When you've been hurt on the job, who decides when you're better? Who decides when the treatment's over? Who decides when your benefits are over? The answer might surprise you. It's the insurance company's doctors. If that doesn't make you feel great, you need to call someone who will have your back. That's Edgar, Snyder Associates. Call them today at 1-800-94-EDGAR because they'll fight for the workers' compensation rights you deserve. Remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Noah, all of Pittsburgh, I think, went into the game against the Chargers thinking like, okay, defense, just don't fall apart, don't look terrible. And it was the offense that looked abysmal, particularly Aaron Rodgers. And I think there was a little bit of PTSD going on because of what happened with Russell Wilson last year and Ben Roethlisberger back in the early 2020s. Is Aaron Rodgers, we'll break down some of the individual mistakes that he had. He missed open guys, missed reads, looked a little spooked by Khalil Mack and some of the hits he took. Is this a sign that Aaron Rodgers is washed, or was this just a one-off bad night that he can bounce back from?
Well, I mean, first things first, I feel like I got to call Edgar after having to be subjected to watching that football game last night. My goodness, I feel like I'm entitled to some sort of compensation for that performance, Chris. But in all seriousness, I'm not ready to write off Aaron Rodgers yet. Because even, you can look at the trends. Obviously, he wasn't great the week prior.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's ever had an inaccurate game like that before.
That was pretty well.
And there were people on my timeline on X pointing that out, saying like this wasn't what he looked like even at his worst in New York or Green Bay. Now, on one side of the coin, you could say that that's a regression, that he's old, he's cooked, he's washed. On the other side, you could just say he had a really bad game. And that's kind of where I'm sitting right now. Now, I don't think that that's the full story, though. You want to dig a little deeper. You want to ask, okay, well, why did he have that bad of a game? And I think by asking that question, you're able to really find out, to me, the real answer to the problem is that I think opponents know how to scheme against this offense now. I think that they understand that there are only a couple of groupings or packages that this team can routinely move the ball consistently when they're in, and they understand their personnel shortcomings. This team's only really built to score points one way. And when you take that away from them, they're in trouble. And we've seen the regression for Rodgers. I think it coincides with teams taking DK Metcalf away. I think it coincides with teams finding situations where they can't utilize these three tight end sets. And you look at this offense, there's really only one guy who you can count on to consistently perform right now, and it's Jalen Warren. Yeah. And if you're in situations where you can't utilize Jalen Warren, the entire offense is in trouble. And that makes life harder for the quarterback. I think that's why we saw Rodgers look a little out of whack yesterday. Now, I think that he definitely made things worse for himself, and he's probably the reason they found themselves in those situations, why they couldn't play to their strengths. He put them in that hole, but I think the bigger problem is that this is an offense that just doesn't have the tools in the tool shed to be what it probably needs to be right now.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is that you got Aaron Rodgers, and he's still, I think he's a great processor of the field, historically. And most of this year he has been. Like, I'm not gonna play around here and like act like he's been terrible this year or mid. He's been very good at seeing the field, distributing the football, and finding answers. Even against in some of their losses, that Bengals game, there were some great throws, great reads he made. The Packers game, he made some really good plays. Last week, he had some misses here and there, but by and large, they got the job done enough to beat another really good offense, so the defense had a good day. But this is a game where there were a lot of, I felt like, mid-range jump shots and layups that were missed. And like maybe between 3-pointers, like the one bomb to DK Metcalf when he was on the run. If he hits that, that's an amazing throw and catch, and that would have been great. But to your point, like they kept the safety over top of DK Metcalf a lot,
and not just a safety. one of these best safeties in the game too. Yeah,
exactly. Derwin James, a bad man. And Aaron Rodgers, said this week when we talked to him, he was like, he's like, if I know that guy is out there, I'm avoiding him. And, and that's something that he takes note on who he's facing and matchups and all of that. And so you saw him try to work other things, but just not seeing things in time. I thought like there were plenty of times Kenneth Gainwell's breaking wide open and he's not seeing them. And then there were times where he did see guys, he just flat out missed them. The Jonnu Smith, if the ball that he threw to him, if it's not like, 10 feet in the air and Jonnu Smith doesn't have to go up and get it the way he did, didn't come down with it, he catches that ball. I didn't see anybody behind him. Like that might have been a play where he gets a touchdown or at least gets you inside the 10 and sets yourself up for a really good chance to score there. Same thing for the Kenneth Gainwell pass that he overthrew in the red zone where he missed him there. Those are two plays where if he throws those could be touchdowns or lead to touchdowns. And that's 14 points on drives. They got 0 points because one was the missed field goal from Chris Boswell drive with the Jonnu Smith play. Another was the fourth down miss. And even on the fourth down miss, he admitted at the podium after the game, he went to DK Metcalf, just trying to force it there. He needed to not to because you look to the other side of the field, Pat Freiermuth breaking wide open to the middle part of the field. I didn't feel like the Steelers didn't have options, but I felt like Jesse Minter did a good job disguising what they were allowing to be open because every defense has weaknesses. And I think he did a good job mixing up where that was. And with the pressure, keeping Aaron Rodgers guessing. Mike Tomlin gave Minter, the Chargers defensive coordinator, a lot of credit for that after the game.
Yeah, I mean, they just didn't seem like they were on the same page. Aaron didn't seem comfortable. And that's where typically, like when you compare past quarterbacks where they're starting to fade, like I think there are two things that I look at as like, okay, they're cooked. They're past their prime, and it's the game speeds up on them and the throw velocity. I mean, Aaron Rodgers' throws are still crisp. I would argue last night they were too crisp. He's throwing it too hard. He's overthrowing guys. I mean, the velocity's still there, and accuracy never really fades through age. That's like the one trait that kind of sticks with guys. The only time an inaccuracy occurs is when the game speeds up on them. And the game did look like, I mean, that was the worst case of happy feet I've seen from him this season. I mean, for the most part, and you might be able to disagree. You watch a lot more film than I do, Carter, but I feel like his pocket presence has been fine this year, despite the O-line. The O-line has had its inconsistencies. Correct. He's been able to avoid pressure despite not being, as mobile as he was when he was in that Green Bay era where he was, winning MVPs almost every year. It just looked like, they just weren't on the same page. It seemed like he didn't kind of know what to do or didn't trust what to do. And that's the bigger problem, that we're halfway into the season now, and they just don't seem to either be on the same page or trust that they're in the right situation to execute. And I think that was my bigger takeaway, is less on performance and more on just they weren't ready prepared for what was happening. They got out schemed.
Yeah. I think that they were definitely out of source with what the Chargers were trying to do. And again, I think it's like, hey, there's plays there, but that's where you're hoping that Aaron Rodgers can see through things on the field and be able to say, hey, they're doing this, let's attack here. Because they certainly, again, they had their opportunities. Guys, Calvin Austin was breaking open. And then I think the frustration certainly set in on this team. It kind of goes back to, something Cam Heyward said after the Packers loss, saying like, you need to respond well to adversity. I think the defense responded well to adversity in this game. They certainly kept rising to the challenge and keeping them alive. But the offense, I mean, you just saw the pass ricochet off of Calvin Austin's hands, turned into an interception. And then, the muffed punt on special teams, like those two plays. I mean, the game was pretty much over by that point, but those plays were like the final nails in the coffin for the Steelers to have even a chance at a comeback in this one. And I look at this and I say, like, man, like, does this team have answers if Aaron Rodgers is out of sorts? And you'd think it was the run game. You'd think that Jalen Warren, who averaged 5 yards per carry, which was the highest of any runner last night, you'd think that could be an answer there. But when you fall behind because you turn over the ball too much, it kind of takes away the run game. And that's why Mike Tomlin often talks about turnovers, why the Steelers prioritize turnovers, because if you can get those turnovers, you can turn those turnovers into points, then all of a sudden the other team becomes limited. They can box it, and that's exactly what happened to the Steelers last night. I think that's the thing about Aaron Rodgers. I'm with you. I'm not saying that he's washed or cooked just yet, but I do think that, like you said, there is a blueprint for how to stop what the Steelers want to do right now. And if you have the personnel, you can match up with that. And I think the Chargers showed, hey, we can match up with the Bigs, limit the run long enough, and then get after Aaron Rodgers in ways that's going to frustrate him. And if we can just play a game of who's going to blink first, who's going to make the first big mistake, we can capitalize. And who made the first mistake? Aaron Rodgers. Throws it to DK Metcalf, tries to hit what was a well-covered play, overthrows it, it's intercepted, missed a wide-open Kenneth Gainwell on that play, and what happened? The Chargers took that interception, walked it right into the end zone afterwards, and then all of a sudden the Chargers had the advantage they wanted, and then it was kind of like, a poker game where, like, you get your opponent to miss on their first big bet, and then you just lean on them, and then eventually they just like, we can't, we don't have the resources to outbet you in this situation. So I think that's kind of what happened here. The Chargers did that. And the Steelers now have to be aware because other teams are going to have that, down the stretch here. The Bengals defense isn't all that, but, they have other questions there. We'll talk about the defense in the next segment. But an offense like a defense like the Bears that's been pretty good this year. That's been pretty aggressive. The Bills defense not so much. The Ravens defense knows you, so they're going to be bringing it.
Right.
But you got Aiden Hutchinson on this schedule with the Lions and their ability to get teams. The Browns in Cleveland, we know that's always a tough place for the Steelers to play. There are going to be times where they're going to be tested again, and the Steelers have to be ready for a better counterpunch when teams try to do what the Chargers did last night.
Yeah, I mean they have been a pretty simple scheme so far. I mean, if I'm an opposing defensive coordinator, I'm looking at this game tape from last night and even past weeks, and I'm saying, like, I don't know if I can completely stop them like Los Angeles did Sunday night, but I know how to contain them. They're not going to move the ball like they want to move the ball against my defense, just because they're very limited in what they can do. And that's not a fault, I think, of a lot of players. It's just they were built to only kind of move the ball in a few ways. And when you can't guarantee moving the ball in those few ways, you're in big trouble.
I feel you on that, and that's a big problem for the Steelers. The defense, though, did show up, and I want to talk about the defense for a second here because they're playing a Bengals team that shredded them just a few weeks ago. But despite that, FanDuel has the Steelers at 5.5-point favorites going into this game over the Bengals in their rematch at Acrisure Stadium this week. The Steelers have the money line starting the week at -245. The Bengals at +200 with the over/under set at 50.5 points right there. That's going to be interesting to watch. We're going to talk on the other side of this break here and look at what do the Steelers need to do defensively that they can, and if the Steelers defense is finding answers. That's next here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Chris Carter, Noah Hiles, stick with us. We'll be right back. We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter here with Noah Hiles reacting to the Steelers-Chargers loss 25-10 on Sunday Night Football. We want to remind you, though, this show is also brought to you by Olivia Numismatic Rarities. If you got old gold or jewelry collecting dust, turn it into instant cash safely and securely by going to Olivia Numismatic Rarities, which you can find right here in Pittsburgh's Shady Side neighborhood. Gold prices are at historic highs, and O&R pays top dollar for your unwanted gold, silver, and coins. Stop by their premier gallery at 5833 Ellsworth Avenue in Shady Side, or learn more at their website, onrcoins.com. That's onrcoins.com, or call 412-900-COIN today. We're also brought to you by Goldberg, Persky, and White. If you were diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer, call your local attorneys at Goldberg, Persky, and White. For over 40 years, their firm has represented thousands of lung cancer and mesothelioma victims. Call 1-800-COMPLEX or visit gpwlaw.com for a free consultation. Noah, the defense at the end of the day gave up 25 points, and Ladd McConkey had a big night, 107 receiving yards and a touchdown on 4 catches. Justin Herbert finishes the game with 220 passing yards and a touchdown. But they did have a running back, got 95 yards and 25 carries, less than 4 yards per carry. But the Chargers offense wasn't shut down. But I didn't feel like the Steelers' defensive plan was off compared to where we had seen in other points this year. And in fact, as much as, and I think this is part of the situation the Steelers just are in, you saw Justin Herbert get hit, a lot more than Aaron Rodgers in this game, as far as like, in the middle of the, on plays that actually resulted in sacks. And in general, the Steelers finished this game with 5 sacks. And if I'm counting this right, they had about 9 quarterback hits officially registered on the night. The Chargers just had 3 sacks and 5 quarterback hits. But you saw Justin Herbert, I think, respond to it better because he's younger, he's bigger. He's in the part of his career where he can respond to those better and not have to shy away from those hits because of his age. I thought the Steelers' defensive plan was fine. I think it's another sign that maybe this adjustment where they have Jalen Ramsey and Kyle Duggar at safety and they're playing more cover 2 looks where the cornerbacks have support and the pass rush seems to be more coordinated. I think whatever the plan is right now, it's working, but they might need this defense to carry them a bit more down the stretch if the offense is going to struggle like this.
Yeah, I kind of think it's ironic. The Chargers offense won that game the way the Steelers offense is supposed to win games. It took advantage of short fields. It took advantage of turnovers. It made long field goals. It just did enough, right? That it played complementary football to a really good defensive performance. I don't have a lot of qualms with the defense. I think they only allowed 1 or 2 big plays, and they were at their worst when the game was pretty much over to begin with. So I thought that they created a lot of opportunities where if the offense just did its job, that's an entirely different football game, and you can scheme differently. You have to play a lot different on that side of the ball when your offense isn't moving the football, when it isn't converting on 3rd down consistently, when it's not finishing drives in the red zone, when it's not putting up points. You have to play a little bit more aggressive, and that creates openings for the Chargers. So I had no problem with how the defense looked. I thought this is their best 2-week stretch of the season by far. And I know that 2 weeks ago's performance is carrying the workload there, right? Because, that was their best game of the year. But, the pressure was there. I thought they were pretty solid on the money downs. It didn't look like the Chargers achieved much of what they wanted to achieve until the game was pretty much over. So I would call that a win. But on the bigger note, though, Chris, like you mentioned, how sustainable is this? When you're looking down the road, it's ironic. A couple weeks ago, we were wondering if it was the opposite, if it's the offense that could carry this team all the way down the stretch.
Because you're to call them on that.
Yeah, and now it shows what I know, right? I don't know why you're having me on here, but in all seriousness, you look ahead. They're playing an offense where, everyone rolls their eyes at the Bengals in the NFL, but this Bengals team made this defense look foolish. And I would say that this defense is probably a little bit more banged up in the secondary now compared to the last time they played it. So, their personnel looks a little different with how they're playing Ramsey, and I'll be interested to see how they address that. But you just look down the line, how many 23-20 wins can they grind out against this schedule? It just seems like a very daunting task to ask this defense to play better than they did Sunday night for the second half of the season through its entirety. I don't know if that's a realistic expectation. The
Bengals are averaging, since they traded for Joe Flacco, 37.6 points in 3 games.
Elite.
And that's ridiculous. Now, the Steelers do get the benefit of, hey, we saw what they did last time. We're playing a little bit better, and they're in Pittsburgh. But the Bengals are also coming off a bye, and that's going to be a big thing. But to your point, it's not just about the Bengals right now. It's also about the rest of the schedule. When you look at the Steelers and the teams they play, Caleb Williams, he's an athletic quarterback. We've seen him continue to grow. What Josh Allen brings to the table. What Lamar Jackson brings to the table. The Dolphins had their upset of the Bills. Maybe they're not just dead in the water just yet. And then you got the Lions, who Dan Campbell took over the play calling, and they're just running teams over right now.
Right.
So you got some serious offenses coming away on top of the Jamar Chase, T. Higgins led Joe Flacco offense. And I think you're right. Like, this is not a gimme for the Steelers that, they're just going to be fine.
It's supposed to be. Like, when you look at their schedule, this is supposed to be the easy win. Like at this point, like if I were to tell you, hey, second half of the year, Bengals coming to Pittsburgh without Joe Burrow, and then you look at the records of the other teams you're playing, you still, like you said, you still have Baltimore, you still have Detroit, you still have Buffalo, you still have all of these other offenses, Chicago. This is supposed to be the one that you're like, all right, as long as we don't play down to the level of competition, we'll win that one. This is as big as a concern as any of them. And that just, I think, speaks to the inconsistencies of this entire football team. You don't know what you're going to get when the offense takes the field. You don't know what you're going to get when the defense takes the field. It's a week by week changing production. Part of that's the NFL, but I think another part of it is an indictment on who this team is, how it's built, and how it's been operating for a while.
And I think that's the thing, is that the Steelers team, there's realistic expectations, and then there's the expectations everyone gets. Like, when you beat the number one team in the AFC, a lot of people were saying Super Bowl on the table. And I've been maintaining, look, man, I think the max for this team is an 11-win season. Yeah. And I think that they could still get that if they go on a tear down the stretch here, because they do have answers on offense. They do have answers on defense, and they can beat some of these teams. And listen, like the Bills and the Ravens, they're not infallible. Like they certainly have their rough share of games. But again, that's the max for them. I thought that their max this year was an 11-win season if they had the right things, and then if they match up with the right team in the first round of the playoffs, I thought they could get a playoff win before they, go on the road in the divisional round and play a really tough team. But the Steelers have to get there first, and it's not a clear path that you can see. Like you said, like the Bengals upcoming are kind of one of the games they kind of, it's a must-win game at this point when you look at the Steelers and their path forward. As are their game in Cleveland, where they haven't won since 2021. It's and that's not an easy place to play. And I'd argue that the Dolphins is another must-win game, and you need to win one of those games against the Ravens. You need to at least split with them, and then maybe steal a game between Buffalo or Detroit. Those aren't easy things we're talking about there. So the defense, I do think they're finding answers. I also think that maybe, as crazy as this sound, with all the talk of all the hype of all the defensive backs that they added in this year, maybe playing James Pierre is an answer, because Noah, this guy has been targeted on the year, I think, like 11 times, and he has like 6 breakups. It's ridiculous what he's done. And granted, those are spots. Those aren't exactly he's not facing the number one wide receiver in doing that. But he has been so feisty. The slam the WWE move that he put on last night. Maybe play him, considering the problems you've had with Darius Slay and then Brandin Echols getting cooked last night.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's not like they have Deion Sanders ahead of him on the depth chart, and I think Pierre was one of their best players on either side of the ball last night. I mean, his tackles, how many tackles did he have, Carter? At least,
let me go back here.
I want to say at least 8, I believe, maybe more. Pierre, or I could be totally wrong.
5 combined tackles, but also 2 breakups.
Okay, so there we go. So not 8, but still 5. He was involved. Yeah. It seemed like he was involved in pretty much every play he could have been involved in. I mean, at the same time, when you're sitting here thinking like, all right, James Pierre is the answer, that not the best set of circumstances to be under, but yeah, I think that at this point in the year, you've got to play whoever gives you even a remote possibility of an upgrade. Like I said, I think the defense is trending upward. I kind of felt that way just throughout the early season struggles. I think the Green Bay game, I kind of changed my tone, and I was like, oh, maybe they're just never going to figure it out. But at the end of the day, I mean, you look up front, there is so much talent up front. Yeah. Like there are just the odds of all of those pass rushers having a down year at the same time, it's just mathematically is improbable. I'm not saying it's impossible, and obviously injuries and age can factor into those things, but the odds that TJ Watt, Highsmith, Herbig, Heyward, Harmon, all of these guys, that they're all going to have the worst year of their careers at the same time, eventually some of them are going to show up and be the players that we know them to be or believe they could be. And I think we're starting to see that. I think we're starting to see at least that element of the defense find level water, but the secondary is still yeah, that's a concern when you're looking at these quarterbacks that they're going to have to face. When you look at these wide receiver corps they're going to have to face, it's looking like it's going to be one of those, hey, hope you guys can get 4 or 5 turnovers a game, because if not,
Right.
the offense isn't good enough and the secondary isn't good enough to really outduel these opposing quarterbacks.
Yeah, they need this defensive front to come through, and again, in a way, they did last night. 5 sacks, a second straight game with 2 sacks for Alex Highsmith.
Yep.
Watt has his 6th sack in his last 7 games. And Herbig had a sack. Also, Keanu Benton now with 4.5 sacks. It's funny when you look at the pass rush numbers right now. Through 9 games, the Steelers' leader is T.J. Watt with 6 sacks, but right behind him, Alex Highsmith with 5.5, Nick Herbig with 5.5, and Keanu Benton with 4.5. That's the stuff you like to see, is a lot of guys bunching up front. So, I'm sure that, Teryl Austin, Carl Dunbar, Denzel Martin, the defensive coaches that, scheme up the pressure, they appreciate that, because now it's not like, it's like, okay, go ahead, double and triple team TJ Watt. We have other guys, but, to your point, they need to be able to do that while also still taking things away. And then on the flip side, they can't be on the field for as long as they were. The Steelers came into this game as the 30th ranked time of possession team. They averaged having the ball for 27 minutes and 35 seconds a game going into this one. They had the ball for just 22 minutes in this game. You can't ask the defense to keep living like that. And that goes back to why they need the offense to have better nights than what they did on Sunday.
Yeah. And that was the whole thing that I thought, that was the most valuable element of Rodgers that I thought I took away from the first month or so in the season, is there weren't a lot of 3 and outs. They moved the football. And even when they weren't scoring, it wasn't just they got the ball and a minute off the clock later, they didn't have the ball anymore. That was the story with, whatever quarterback they trotted out there post Ben for a while. And that's really what they need them to be. And we can, we just explained why that hasn't been the case. But when you keep that defense on the field, it's such a high intensity scheme. Their legs are going to wear thin in the fourth quarter. And that's where all the, other people on Twitter always complain, oh, they fall apart in the fourth quarter. Well, a lot of the time when they fall apart in the fourth quarter, it's because they shouldn't have been on the field that long at that point. And I get it. They're paid to overcome those things, and elite teams do. And maybe they're just not an elite defense. But, I think there's an explanation as to why the defense typically fades late in games, because like what you said, Carter, that time of possession stat should explain a lot of things.
It should. We're going to break more things down about this throughout the rest of the week. We'll have our Wednesday edition of the North Shore Drive podcast. Noah's going to be talking with our guy Ray this week, as they normally do, and we'll be in the Steelers locker room. I'll be doing my film study to see what's going on, and maybe break down more parts of what's wrong in the offense. But the Steelers still sit at first place in the AFC North, but the Ravens are creeping up right behind them at 4-5, only a game back down the stretch here. It's going to be an interesting competitive run to see who comes away with the AFC North, and also who comes away in the AFC right now, because the Steelers still hold on to that 4 seed. But the second that they don't have the AFC North, they're going to be in a jumble. They're 5-4. So is the 7 seed Jaguars. So are the 8 seed Kansas City Chiefs, and the Texans sit at 4-5 right now. A lot of teams battling for playoff spots, and the Steelers might need to win the AFC North to guarantee that they're going to be in that mix. But we'll be breaking that down throughout the rest of the week. Noah, thanks so much for joining me here, buddy.
Absolutely, partner. Great to be doing content with you again.
Absolutely. The former Pit Beat reunites here.
Yes, sir.
On the North Shore Drive podcast. Thanks again for tuning into the North Shore Drive podcast. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get all of your daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And we'll see you again soon here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.